Democrats could have sent anyone. They could have sent Hunter Biden, they could have sent Joe Biden, they could have sent Rob Walker, they could have sent Devin Archer. The Democrats could have sought any person to come and refute the direct evidence backed up by bank statements, backed up by calendar entries, backed up by emails, backed up by text messages. And who did the Democrats send to clear the name of Joe and Hunter Biden? They sent Lev Parnas. Lev Parnas, who was charged with enough crimes and violating our campaign finance laws to, serve 50 years, but he gets 4 months. The fraud he committed wasn't just on our election system by plowing Russian money, it was also a fraud on his own investors who didn't get it.
While we're on Mr. Gaetz, he seemed to be upset about a couple different things. One was fraud, which was fascinating to me, given that his hero, Donald Trump, has just been convicted civilly of bank and insurance fraud in New York in a civil case, and now owes, I think it's $454 million, unless that's gone up with interest. I think he's having a hard time making that, but I'm sure that Mr. Gaetz's constituents will help him out as they're shaking down Republican voters. You can pay either for Donald Trump's criminal lawyers or his civil lawyers. That's the big political choice, I suppose.
Will the Department of Justice provide to the committee all documents, all correspondence between the department and Alvin Bragg's office and Fonnie Willis's office and Letitia James's office?
The offices you're referring to are independent offices of state.
I get that. The question is whether or not you will provide all of your documents and correspondence. That's the question. I don't need a history lesson.
Well, I'm going to say again, we do not control those offices. They make their own decisions.
The question is whether you communicate with them, not whether you control them. Do you communicate with them, and will you provide those communications?
If you make a request, we'll refer it to our Office of Legislative Affairs.
But see, here's the thing. You come in here and you lodge this attack that it's a conspiracy theory, that there is coordinated lawfare against Trump. And then when we say, fine, just give us the documents, give us the correspondence, and then if it's a conspiracy theory, that will be evident. But when you say, well, we'll take your request, and then we'll sort of work it through the DOJ's accommodation process, then you're actually advancing the very dangerous conspiracy theory that you're concerned about.
I noticed Mr. Gaetz, who took you on first, is not here now. And that's unfortunate because he is living testament to the fact and direct evidence that you have not weaponized the Justice Department. He was investigated for sex trafficking, and while many expected a prosecution, you chose not to prosecute this very active Republican. Is that true? You did not prosecute him?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure what is in the public record and what's not, so I'm just not going to comment on that.
Haven't you learned yet that the military is weaker, not stronger, with the 8,600 people that you vax mandated out of the military?
Just one point, Congressman. The reason I'm here is because the chairman requested that I appear to talk about the circumstances surrounding my hospitalization.
But don't you see the hypocrisy in it? Because you screwed up, we fix your screw up, and now you want grace, but these people who sought religious exemptions, they got no such grace. And also, I just think it's ridiculous that we're in 3 wars, you went AWOL for 3 days, and we get 2 hours with you. If you can't spend more than 2 hours answering these questions, I don't know how you really operate in all these wars.
If we want to talk about what's going on in national security and the greatest threat to national security, it's not that the Secretary of Defense screwed up and is cleaning up the mess. The greatest threat to national security is the polarization of the country and the fact that we can't explain to the world who we are and what kind of leadership role we want.
What I bring to the House now is the most fulsome amendment to completely remove DEI from the DOD. We have standards in the military that allow the military to expel racists and white supremacists completely in the absence of DEI programs. We've had those standards in the military for quite some time.
This amendment does nothing to address the recruitment shortfalls that our services are facing, and instead it will only make it more difficult to recruit Americans on diverse backgrounds representing the true makeup of our nation. What are you so afraid of? Why do you keep bringing these divisive issues to the body of this floor? You are out of order. You are exhausting, Mr. Gaetz.
The gentleman is no longer recognized.
Now, you were a judge, once nominated to the highest court in our country. When you were a judge, I'm just curious, did you ever make political donations to partisan candidates?
No.
No, and you didn't because that would create the potential appearance of impropriety.
I didn't because there's a federal rule
Oh.
barring federal judges from making contributions.
Right, but under that same theory of attacks on the judicial process, like, shouldn't someone be owed like a jury of their peers and a judge that's non-biased rather than getting a judge from your political opponent's donor file?
I'm well aware that you're not asking a hypothetical. You're asking me to comment on a jury verdict in another jurisdiction which has to be respected. I won't comment on it. That case is still ongoing. The defendant
Mr.
has
Attorney General,
indicated-
I hadn't asked you about the verdict yet. We were getting there. I was talking about the judge. And so let me ask you this question about your time as a judge. Was there ever a time when you were a judge when you had a family member who was personally profiting off of the notoriety of a case that was before your court?
Look, I'm going to say again, it's very clear you're asking me to comment on a case in another jurisdiction.
No, wait, hold on, Mr. Attorney General. Did you ever have a family member profit off of the notoriety of any case that you sat over?
Say again, you're asking
Yes or no?
You're asking me to comment on a case currently.
Well, it seems you're
before
connecting the
another
dots,
court.
Mr. Attorney General. I'm just asking you as to a general principle, but you are aware that Judge Merchan's daughter was profiting off of this prosecution. You are aware that that creates the appearance of impropriety. You know the very reason there's a federal rule against judges giving donations is because it is the very attack on the judicial process that we're concerned about.
I'm sorry, I don't agree with anything you just said, but I'm not going to comment on an
Okay,
on an
so you
action
won't
in
comment on it,
another
Mr.
court.
Attorney General, but you had no problem dispatching Matthew Colangelo. Who's Matthew Colangelo?
That is false. I did not dispatch Matthew Colangelo.
Matthew
That's
Colangelo,
false.
Matthew
False.
Colangelo became the Assistant Attorney General at the very beginning of the Biden administration. Without having been Senate confirmed, goes and gets this senior role at the DOJ, and then after, I believe it's Gupta replaces Colangelo, Colangelo makes this remarkable downstream career journey from the U.S. Department of Justice in Washington, D.C., and then pops up in Alvin Bragg's office to go get Trump. And you're saying that's just a career choice that was made that has nothing to do with the lawfare coordinated by
I'm
the
saying it's false. I did not dispatch Mr. Colangelo anywhere.
Well, do you know how he ended up there?
I assume he applied for a job there and got the job.
But see, you know
I
what?
can tell
you know
you
what?
I had nothing to do with it.
Well, you might not have had anything to do with it, but we've got this contemporaneous evidence in Mr. Pomerantz's book. So Pomerantz writes this book, which I'm sure you're aware of, where he says, we put together the legal eagles to get Trump. We got all these folks together and we assembled them for that purpose. And so when we on the Judiciary Committee think about attacks on the judicial process, our concern is that the facts and the law aren't being followed. A target is acquired, here, Trump, and then you assemble the legal talent from DOJ, Mr. Pomerantz, and you bring everybody in to get him. And meanwhile, the judge is making money on it. The judge is making money on it, or the judge's family is making money on it for stuff that you yourself wouldn't do. You know, no one's going to buy this. No one's going to believe it. It's going to create great disruption. And I am saddened by it because, like you, I have given my life to the law. I care deeply about the law, and I think that the lawfare we've seen against President Trump will do great damage well beyond our time in public service. I see my time's expired. I yield back.
I just want to get this straight. Mr. Gaetz wants the Attorney General to reopen and publicize evidence from an investigation that a Donald Trump-appointed prosecutor closed against President Biden, while at the same time, Mr. Gaetz himself is being protected by the same DOJ policy that is refusing to voluntarily turn over evidence from Mr. Gaetz's sex trafficking investigation. Mr. Attorney General, can you just briefly, without going into the facts of that case, address why that is the DOJ policy as it relates to the current president and any other requests about closed investigations?
Yeah, without referencing any case, we try to protect the law enforcement files of the Justice Department so that in future investigations, people are willing to cooperate with us. We understand Congress's concerns, and we have an obligation to assess whether the information that we've provided is sufficient to accommodate the legitimate needs of the Congress. All of the reasons that Congress has given us for why they need the audio are satisfied with respect to the tapes. That is, all of the legitimate reasons given, the reasons that relate to legislative work of the committee. As to that, we've accommodated by providing the audio. We provided Mr. Herr's testimony in full, and we provided Mr. Herr's testimony report. We've gone as far as we can go to accommodate. We're trying to protect our ability to do investigations in this case and in any other case.
Mr. Attorney General, let's set the facts straight here. And my job is to kind of lead an intervention for my colleagues. I think they need it. The Attorney General did not prosecute Donald Trump in New York. It was the result of Donald Trump's choices. Donald Trump chose to live in New York. He chose to commit his crimes in New York. He was afforded a right to be tried by his neighbors, jurors, in New York. He chose that jury in New York, working with his counsel, and they chose to make him a 34-time over convicted felon. But some of the choices the department has made in the recent years is that the president that was first appointed, that Donald Trump appointed the U.S. attorney who is investigating the current president's son. Donald Trump appointed John Durham, who investigated the wild claims made by this committee during the Russia investigation. And Donald Trump appointed Robert Hur, who was kept on by the Biden administration. Also, you have the right in our country to aid yourself in your own defense and talk to investigators. You also have a right not to. Mr. Attorney General, did Donald Trump sit down for an interview in the Mueller investigation?
I actually don't know, but I'm not going to comment on other investigations.
He didn't. Did he sit down for an interview with investigators prior to the January 6th indictment?
I'm not going to comment on
He didn't. He also didn't sit down for an interview with investigators in the classified materials indictment, but President Biden did sit down for a voluntary interview with Robert Hur. A jury can't hold it against Donald Trump that he did not testify in his own defense in New York, but he promised everyone else in the country that he would. You can hold it against Donald Trump that he did not testify when you consider whether you should so blindly follow every wild claim that he makes.
And even if my amendment doesn't pass, I want my colleagues to know that this NDAA in the base bill takes a meat cleaver to DEI. And the amendments that we have adopted in the last round of voting have certainly ensured that DEI, regardless of the passage or not of my amendment, will not be a principal feature of our military service if this bill becomes law, and that would be a great thing for our military.
Mr. Speaker, the previous speaker, the maker of this amendment, talked about being exhausting. This issue that he has brought before this body and the committee is exhausting. Just this week, the sponsor of this amendment called diversity, equity, and inclusion in the military a, quote, failed experiment. He has called it cancerous. Just this week, a senator from Alabama stated that it was his opinion that white nationalists are not necessarily racist and refused to denounce white nationalists serving in the military. All of this with the backdrop of the same senator holding up hundreds of military nominations, which is actively hurting our national security, something that this NDAA bill would address. To what end? The U.S. Marine Corps does not have a confirmed commandant as we speak. And yet, just an hour ago, on this very floor, one of the members on the other side of this body said,
my amendment has nothing to do with whether or not colored people or black people or anybody can serve, okay? It has nothing to do with color of your skin, any of that stuff.
I'd like to be recognized to have the words colored people stricken from the record. I find it offensive and very inappropriate.
Mr. Speaker, these comments show exactly why we need diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. Every day, our military grows more diverse, more and more reflecting the diversity of our nation.
Excuse me, a point of order, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman from Florida is recognized.
No, Mr. Speaker, I've made a point of order. You have to rule on the point of order.
The gentleman will state his point of order.
The gentleman has an obligation to address the chair, not other members. He did not do that. He was out of order, violating the decorum of the House.
The gentleman has not stated a proper point of order.
A parliamentary inquiry, then. I seek recognition to make a parliamentary inquiry.
The gentleman will state his parliamentary
What is the
question.
parliamentary mechanism that requires an individual to address the chair? Because if it's not that, and we can address each other, let's do that for the rest of the debate.
The chair will not engage in this dialogue. Would the gentleman like to be recognized first?
I want to be recognized for a parliamentary inquiry.
The gentleman is not recognized. Would you
I'm not
like to be
recognized for a parliamentary inquiry? I'm not recognized for a parliamentary
The
inquiry?
chair will not engage with the gentleman.
Mr. Parnas, how much time did you spend in prison? 4 months. But
4 months.
But you were indicted for crimes that could have resulted in you spending 50 years in prison, right?
Right, they were false crimes.
Good.
The judge
Yeah,
saw through
Well,
it.
well
Yeah.
you went to trial and you were convicted, right?
I went to trial, correct.
And the crime was that you were trying to acquire marijuana licenses, and you took money from a Russian oligarch, and you tried to use that money to go give political donations and do what you had to do to acquire marijuana licenses. Is that about right?
That's what the crime was. That's what the indictment was. Yeah.
Right. So it sounds like everyone here today, the only one working for a Russian oligarch was you. Right? I mean,
yeah, it was.
I just heard you.
I mean, it's public information.
Yeah, no, I just heard you
Congressman
wax
Gaetz,
poetic.
I got
with
paid
Mr. Frost about,
$200,000. You know how much I got paid.
You were really worried about our democracy, and you were here to warn us. But you were working for a Russian oligarch,
On
wanting
behalf
to
of
get
President
marijuana
Trump.
licenses. But then you didn't even do it. The fraud you committed against the Russian oligarch was that instead you spent the money on yourself. So, like, was
No,
that what you
that
were
was not the
doing to
fraud.
fight
No,
against
that was not the
Russia's
fraud.
aggression?
That's a lie,
Just taking
Congressman
their
Gaetz.
money? Well, that's what you were convicted of.
No,
but instead of spending 50 years in prison, you got 4 months. As this hearing continues, I look forward to hearing what Mr. Galanis thinks about how he was treated by the DOJ for telling the truth, as opposed to how you're treated for lying.
The DOJ didn't listen to the truth, because if they would listen to the
question,
truth, you
the
guys would've
question
been all
Mr.
in
Gaetz
jail.
had is
They didn't
for
want to hear the
Mr.
truth. You can't handle the
Galan-
truth, Matt Gaetz.
Look, well, the truth for you is taking money from Russians to buy marijuana businesses and then going to jail and then coming here to lie about Trump.
You should know better than anybody
Gentleman's time has
the DOJ is
expired.
about.
Chair
You
now.
should know better than anybody.
Gentleman's time's expired.
So I guess, Mr. Bobulinski, as you hear Maxwell Frost, my colleague on the Democrat side, say that Mr. Parnas, fresh off of his prison time, is the most credible witness we've had to address these business dealings, what's your reaction to that?
I think it's laughable that the Democrats are asking Lev Parnas to weigh in on my credibility, a convicted felon that served jail time. I have an impeccable record. Now, he warned me earlier in this hearing that they're coming for me. I look
I
forward
didn't warn
to
you. I
that.
said just keep talking. You'll be there soon.
I look forward to that, Mr. Parnas.
Keep lying. You'll be there soon.
Well, and
Is that a threat, Mr. Parnas?
No, it's just the truth.
No, did you say they were coming for me?
No, I said if you keep lying, you will end up in prison.
I'm not lying. You're the
Well,
one
then
who
if
was
you're not, you
lying.
have nothing to
You're the
say.
one who went to prison
What am
for
I
lying.
lying for? Tell me what we're lying for, Mr. Bobulinski. You don't even know what you're talking about. What am I lying?
You went to
What
prison
lying?
for lying and defrauding
No,
your
what
investors.
am I lying here? What am I lying here?
Oh, the list is
Go
long.
ahead,
We don't have
go
enough
ahead.
time. I
Exactly,
think Mr.
yeah.
Gaetz only has a minute.
I think you're a little scared, just like
So
Mr.
one
Gaetz.
crime
Because
is-
Mr. Gaetz doesn't even ask a question. You're filibustering. I've been here for 6 hours, and not one of your committee members has asked me one question. You want to
Well, I
hear the
asked you-
truth?
hold on,
No,
hold
you
on,
haven't-
Mr.
no, no. You
I
wanna
asked a
ask
question about
Get
your
to the
illegal
truth.
business
I've been here for
dealings.
7 hours.
Mr.
Ask me
Bobulinski,
some questions.
fraud is a
Stop
crime, right?
filibustering. Go ahead. Ask me.
Correct. Fraud is a crime.
Fraud is a crime, and you observed fraud on the part of the Bidens, right?
I did. Crystal clear.
If you check out the Democrats' report, White House for Sale, how princes, prime ministers, and premiers paid off President Trump, you'll find that China actually gave more than $5 million to Donald Trump while he was president of the United States in direct violation of the emoluments clause, which says that nobody in federal office shall accept a present, an emolument, which means a payment, an office or title of any kind whatever from a king, a prince, or a foreign state. And we spent the day, again, jawboning about Hunter Biden, who has never held public office, and he's never done business with the government. And yet we have right in front of us, in front of our very eyes, mammoth corruption, unprecedented U.S. history by Donald Trump as president. And my friends don't say a single word about it, but he wants to lecture Mr. Parnas about the illegal donations he made on behalf of pro-Trump super PACs. I've noticed something interesting with the people who have finally disenthralled themselves and gotten out of the Trump cult, as Mr. Parnas puts it. People like Michael Cohen, Sarah Matthews, Cassidy Hutchinson, Alyssa Griffin. There's articles about them. There are dozens of those people, and I'd be fleeing for the exits now too. What's so fascinating to me about it is that they don't mind when these people lie for Donald Trump. Then when they get out and start telling the truth, that's when they call them liars for what they did when they worked for Donald Trump. Mr. Parnas, they're not mad that you lied and went to prison for it and did your time. They're mad that you stopped lying for Donald Trump.
Absolutely, Congressman Raskin.
So when I was a state assistant attorney general, Mr. Chairman, I saw a judge on my very first day of work castigate a lawyer by saying, son, you forgot the very first rule of lawyering. When you go to court, you got to bring the evidence with you. You forgot to bring the evidence. There's no evidence. Hundreds of thousands of pages of documents, dozens of hours of testimony, but not a shred of evidence of presidential wrongdoing, much less an impeachable offense by President Biden. And you're making not just the majority a laughingstock, the whole committee a laughingstock. So it's hurting us. My members are saying, when will they call off this nonsense? So here we are. Again, Mr. Parnas, I want to thank you. You have explained to America that the allegations at the very foundation of this inquiry were predicated on Russian propaganda and disinformation, just as they were at the start of the hit job that you and Rudy Giuliani were sent to do back in 2018 and 19. And I want to thank you for showing America what real intellectual honesty and personal honesty look like, and how you can grow out of the deranged Trump syndrome that so many of our colleagues are still suffering from today. It's time to call this investigation for what it is, Mr. Chairman. It's not just an embarrassing failure and an historic failure at that, but it's an historic betrayal of democracy, freedom, and the rule of law as Vladimir Putin tramples the freedoms and the democracy of people in Ukraine. We should be spending our time standing up for democracy and not tarnishing it with spectacles like this. I yield back.
I should have brought my waiters from the farm. Is anyone denying, Mr. Raskin, that the Biden family was influence peddling? Nobody denies that the family was influence peddling. What we have here is a major discrepancy on what role Joe Biden played. We know the 3 former Biden associates say that Joe Biden was actively involved and knew full well what the schemes were, what the family was up to. But we have Hunter Biden testifying under oath that his dad didn't know. So in the coming days, I will invite President Biden to the Oversight Committee to provide his testimony and explain why his family received tens of millions of dollars from foreign companies with his assistance. We need to hear from the president himself. And I assure the American people that they will be able to evaluate for themselves the president's honesty and fitness for the office he now holds. With that,
Mr. Chairman, are you going to invite Donald Trump to come and talk about his violations of the Emoluments Clause?
you all have investigated Donald Trump for years, and I'm pretty sure I've read in the paper that there's a lot of investigations of Donald Trump. No one's investigated
Well, we
Joe
impeached
Biden.
him. You were invited to impeach Joe Biden
Are
today.
you supporting, are you going to work with me to see that Joe Biden comes and answers these discrepancies? I mean, this is a big deal.
There's no discrepancies. There's not
No
been,
discrepancies.
No, there's no evidence at all that he's committed any high crime and misdemeanor. What is it?
In closing, I want to thank our panelists once again for their important and insightful testimony today. With that and without objection, all members will have 5 legislative days within which to submit materials and to submit additional written questions for the witnesses, which will be forwarded to the witnesses for their response. If there is no further business, without objection, the committee stands adjourned.